The basic European Renaissance took place from the 1300s to the 1600s. Yet the Renaissance includes the early Renaissance, the basic Renaissance, including the High Renaissance, the late Renaissance, including Mannerism and Baroque, and the Romantic era. The early Renaissance laid the foundations for the basic Renaissance. It took place in the 1300s to the 1400s. During the early Renaissance, the only aesthetic advances were tapestries used to warm the castle rooms and stained glass.
The Renaissance began in Italy in the early 1300s. It lasted approximately 300 years and spread throughout Europe. The forces that gave rise to the Renaissance and its impulses were political, economical, and personal. Economically, Italy, especially Florence, was thriving. There was the rise of the merchant class, what we would call the middle class. This was an echelon of society that attained a certain freedom that allowed them to be educated. This was a society where there was enough affluence that there was some money left over, some money that could be devoted to the luxury of art. In addition, Italy had never disintegrated to the degree that the rest of Europe had. Italy had preserved the classic art objects and texts of the past, and these art objects and texts were available to the artists and the intellectuals as models. The term Renaissance is a French word meaning rebirth. It refers to a time period in history when the society rediscovered the value of the individual, and this became known as the attitude and philosophy of humanism. The 1,000 years before the time of the Renaissance was known as a period of darkness, or the Middle Ages. The church was very powerful and tolerated little opposition. So rigid was the church that creative thought and new ideas in all fields was stifled. As the Renaissance dawned, the idea was that the classical past could be upheld as an ideal. The reason that they could do this was that most people believed that Europe was still enmeshed in the Dark Ages. They thought that everything had sunk to its lowest level, and that the classical civilization was higher and better. Like the Latin and Greek authors they studied, humanists sought the freedom to cultivate the mind and explore the world unfettered by church doctrine. Several factors contributed to the spread of humanism throughout Europe. One was the invention of the printing press. From the printing press came the dissemination of information, and from that, education. And from that, a more evolved consciousness, the free flow of information and ideas. During the Italian Renaissance, many wealthy families in Italy rose to prominence and promoted humanism through the patronage of writers, scholars, and artists. Of these families, the one that was the most wealthy and most influential was the family of the Medicis. Cosimo de' Medici came to power in 1434. He built the first public library and filled it with thousands of ancient manuscripts. Then in 1469, Cosimo's grandson, Lorenzo de' Medici, came to power. Lorenzo's disposition had a humanist bent, and he became by far the most generous of the Renaissance patrons. Lorenzo himself was a man of learning who felt comfortable in both political and philosophical arenas. Because of the Medici family's support, artists were free from the oppressive grip of the church. They began to look at and study nature and the world around them. The center of this revival of art was Florence, but it flourished in many other Italian cities.
The essence of the Renaissance style of art is known as the High Renaissance style. The characteristics of this style were order, rhythm, highly realistic rendering of form, mythology, history, the religion of Christianity, and humanism. Overall, the artists of the Renaissance wanted harmony and balance.
An important factor for the instigation of the Renaissance was the invention of oil paint, which helped the Renaissance evolve. And though oil paint has been found to have been used during Neolithic times in early cave paintings, and in paintings by Indian and Chinese painters in western Afghanistan somewhere between the 5th and 10th centuries, it didn't reach Europe till much later, most likely reaching Europe via the Silk Road. And it's Jan van Eyck who's given credit for inventing or reinventing oil painting in Europe. Van Eyck was a painter from the Netherlands, and his use of oil paint ushered in a whole new era of technical expertise, the ability to render form smoothly and evenly. Another important Renaissance artist from the Netherlands was Roger van der Weyden. Van der Weyden's life was generally fairly uneventful, though he was highly successful and internationally famous in his lifetime. His paintings were taken to Italy and Spain, and he received commissions from, amongst others, Philip the Good, Netherlandish nobility, and foreign princes.
Alessandro di Mariano di Vanni Filippelli, better known as Sandro Botticelli, belonged to the Florentine school under the patronage of Lorenzo de' Medici. Botticelli is known for his portraits, his religious subject matter, and using mythological motifs. Because his paintings were highly personal, even somewhat manneristic, he is considered by some people to be an outsider from the mainstream of Renaissance art. Hieronymus Bosch, born Hieronymus van Eycken, was a Dutch painter. He's known for his fantastic and strange imagery, detailed landscapes, and presentations of moral and religious concepts and narratives.
Leonardo da Vinci is considered by some to be the greatest artist of all time. He innovated with new approaches into naturalistic form. He was a highly individualistic person and was interested in the way the world worked, in science as well as art. He was the quintessential Renaissance man. He's known to have said, "Nature is the wisest teacher a person can have." Aside from innovating naturalistic form, Da Vinci could be said to be the artist who first brought magic into art. He didn't just paint objects, he imbued them with a kind of special depth that brought some unseen world into play. Michelangelo di Lodovico, better known just as Michelangelo, is the artist many people place as second to Leonardo da Vinci. He was primarily a sculptor, yet was also trained in painting. In 1508, Michelangelo began painting the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. It took him 4 years to complete the task. It is now considered one of his masterpieces. Raffaello Sanzio da Urbino, better known as Raphael, was an Italian painter and architect. His work is known for its clarity of form and ease of composition, and for its visual achievement of the Neoplatonic ideal of human grandeur. Raphael, together with Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci, are considered the traditional trinity of great masters of the Renaissance. Tiziano Vicelli, more often known as Titian, was a painter and most important member of the 16th century Venetian school. Titian is considered by many to be the most versatile of the Italian painters, equally adept with portraits, figures, landscapes, and mythological and religious subjects. Giorgio Barbarelli da Castelfranco, better known as Giorgione, was another important artist of the Renaissance. He's known for an elusive, poetic quality which permeated his work. Uncertainty about the meaning of his art has made Giorgione one of the most mysterious figures in European Renaissance history.